Hello, this is the final section of a five-part webinar series on the book Bring It to Class, Unpacking Popular Culture in Literacy Learning. If you have not already, I would encourage you to view the previous videos as they contextualize the material that will be covered in this section of the series. This webinar will focus on Chapter 6, which is titled Connecting Across Generations via Turning Around Pedagogies. This chapter serves as a way to apply some of the concepts learned in the previous sections into the classroom. This chapter covers some of the barriers that teachers may face when attempting to bring pop culture into the class and ways to break through those barriers. Schools have a way of projecting their stance on bringing pop culture into the class in a variety of ways. Regardless of the method, the outcome typically results in the teachers being placed in a role of watchful guardians and the students being presented as naive and in need of protecting. This typical framework is often what prevents teachers from making connections across generations. So what barriers exist in forming these connections? Well, the book mentions three: identity kits, categorization of roles, and placing students and teachers in socially fixed positions. So what is an identity kit? An identity kit describes the ways we construct ourselves through speech, writing, reading selections, dress, and so on, that enables us to be recognized by others like ourselves as belonging to a particular group. Identity kits serve to separate teachers from students through the material they associate with. You can see why socially categorized roles can prevent teachers from incorporating more culturally and socially responsive material into the classroom. Pushing back. So how can we as teachers push back against the negative aspects of identity kits? Chapter 6 encourages teachers to resist the attempts to polarize students and teachers. This is often the line of thinking that results in a them versus us in conversation. Teachers should be encouraged to acknowledge and celebrate the overlap between pop culture interest amongst teachers and students instead of suppressing them. Teachers must reject the mainstream stereotypes that perpetuate the notion that teachers and students have been set up to have oppositional views. In order to successfully implement turning around pedagogies into the classroom, teachers must be familiar with literacy in 21st century contexts. In order to facilitate increased engagement in literacy, students need to have a platform to demonstrate their skills using 21st century texts as well as traditionally learned texts. The goal here is to bridge the generational divide between the two. One way the book recommends doing this is by connecting literacy activities with social change. A research study cited in the chapter indicates students find more success in incorporating literacy instruction into real actions for social change. This could be accomplished by providing concrete examples of how literacy education extends far beyond the literacy that is received in schools. Teachers must give students the opportunity to explore the power of learned literacy outside of the classroom. A great way to accomplish this is by creating literacy instruction that utilizes 21st century platforms. The good news is that most of these platforms the students are familiar with, engage with regularly, and they are free to use. Literacy assignments that incorporate aspects of social media and other web-based platforms can successfully connect literacy education across generations. At the heart of this paradigm shift in literacy education is turnaround pedagogies. This concept is defined as the term coined by Comber and Kamler to describe the impact of teachers' long-term redesigns of instruction programs to contest deficit assumptions about teaching and learning. Comber and Kamler use the term to evoke images of the kind of pedagogical, curriculum, and people work required for connecting and reconnecting students with literacy. So what are deficit assumptions, you may be asking? Deficit assumptions are the misdirected beliefs that students have little, if anything, to contribute to their own learning. Deficit assumptions tend to focus on what the student struggles with instead of incorporating what they are good at into the learning segments. I want to reiterate here that the focus is to incorporate aspects of literacy instruction that students have success with and bridging it into the traditional curriculum. You may be wondering, what do turnaround pedagogies look like? The book has a number of examples that I encourage you to review and become familiar with. In Chapter 2, Miss Dabbitt's 8th grade reading class was covering Paul Revere's Ride. Instead of teaching the material in her usual way, which is read, reread, and answer guiding questions, Miss Dabbitt linked student interest into movies, graphic novels, manga, and MapQuest to associate those with the famous figure in colonial England. Another example comes from Miss Werfel's class. In this example, Miss Werfel incorporated the students and their friends in the designing of a lesson. The learning segment involved lyrics from their favorite songs and the application of those lyrics into their literacy instruction. This defies the concept of deficit assumptions and demonstrates how students can and should play a role in the instruction that they are receiving. So what else do turnaround pedagogies do? They obviously increase engagement because students can relate easier to the material. Aside from getting students more engaged in the material, they are the beginning stages in the much needed school and cultural paradigm shift in education. So how do we bring this turning around? The chart lists several factors that can affect the integration of pop culture texts with instruction and strategies for interpreting and producing pop culture texts. Some of the salient points include building on student interest, working with the parents and administrators, sustaining turnaround pedagogies over time, and including multiple modes and media. I encourage you to save these strategies as a cheat sheet to be referenced at a later date. In closing, I want to encourage you to challenge the paradigm that exists in your school. This book offers practical ways to incorporate popular culture into the classroom and challenge deficit assumptions. Turnaround pedagogies seem daunting, but start small and the results will be big. Remember to remain persistent in your quest to change the way literacy education is being administered. I encourage you to reflect on the information presented in this learning segment and previous segments. In closing, I challenge you to write down 5 ways you think you can apply turnaround pedagogy to your classroom, and apply the material we have covered today in your own instruction. Thank you.